The dirtiest trick of Machiavelli to make a woman think about you is not born from love. It is born from silent power constructed inside her mind. You are not trying to win her, you are trying to become a thought she cannot ignore. Through doubt, through rarity, through calculated absence, you transform yourself into the mystery she feels compelled to solve. And in trying to solve you, she becomes trapped inside your shadow. The dirtiest trick of Machiavelli to make a woman think about you does not begin with words, gifts, or attention. It begins with the silent manipulation of her imagination, with the creation of a carefully engineered void that forces her to fill the unknown with you. Machiavelli understood something most men never learn. Desire is not born from what is obvious. Desire is born from what is never fully given. It is not constant presence that obsesses a woman. It is selective absence. Absence that shows her just enough to believe she knows you, but never enough to feel safe about it. And inside that crack, inside that emotional instability, a loop is created. Recurrent thoughts, uninvited memories, curiosity that turns into attraction, and attraction that turns into obsession. Everything begins the moment you decide. Your value is not negotiable. Your time is not a gift. Your attention is not a cheap currency. The dirty trick is not being cruel. The dirty trick is having the cold awareness that human beings attach more deeply to what confuses them than to what comforts them. When a woman cannot read your intentions, her instinct starts working against her. She tries to decode you, justify your silences, analyze your replies, interpret every gesture as if it hides a secret meaning. And the more she tries to understand you, the deeper she sinks into your shadow. The more she thinks about you, the heavier you become in her mind, even when you are not there. She believes she is discovering you, but in reality, she is walking inside a narrative you already designed. Machiavelli taught, whoever controls perception controls power. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to be unpredictably consistent. Not disappearing randomly, but disappearing when she expects you to be present. Not replying fast to show interest, but replying when she least expects it. Breaking the emotional rhythm she believes she understands. Because the most powerful move is to disrupt predictability. A mind that cannot predict you revisits you, replays you, chases you internally, and there is no more effective way to occupy a woman's thoughts than to become an enigma she cannot stop trying to solve. And here comes the most Machiavellian part. When she reaches out to you emotionally, you don't respond with the same intensity. Not because you're cold, but because you understand something most men don't. Intensity is a weapon, and weapons only work when used with precision. You allow her to be the one who asks first, the one who sends the message she hoped to receive from you, the one who takes the first step when your silence begins to feel like an uncomfortable void. And every time she takes one of those steps, you rise another level inside her mind. She doesn't realize it, but she is investing emotional energy into you. No one invests energy into what doesn't matter. No one insists on someone who hasn't touched their ego, and you already touched hers in a way she cannot ignore. Another part of the dirty trick is never showing your need. Women become obsessed with men whose lives appear to move forward without depending on them. Men with goals, mysteries, ambitions, inner worlds they don't explain easily. Not because women want suffering, but because their psychology is wired to value what they cannot control. When you become an emotional territory she cannot conquer in one day, one message, or one gesture, you begin to occupy permanent space in her mind. She thinks about you to predict what you will do. She thinks about you to understand why you didn't do something. She thinks about you even while trying to distract herself. And every thought is another link in a chain slowly tightening around her interest. What Machiavelli understood, and modern men forgot, the one who dictates the emotional rhythm controls the game. A man who gives himself too fast loses his charm, because he removes the tension that allows a woman to project fantasy onto him. The dirty trick demands patience, cold blood, and surgical precision to never do too much or too little. You send a warm message, then silence. You give a deep look, then indifference. You show what feels like interest, then pull back as if nothing happened. And this psychological dance creates doubt. Does he like me or not? That question is the beginning of obsession. That question is the root of the game. That question is what makes her come back even when she tries to walk away. While she is thinking, you are advancing, not aggressively, strategically. And when you finally show availability, you do it as if you have no idea what effect you caused. That multiplies your power because it makes you hard to read. And a man who is hard to read is hard to forget. She starts feeling drawn to you without being able to explain why. She justifies you, excuses you, defends you, even inside her own mind. You are no longer just a man, you become a concept, a mystery, a possibility that does not resolve easily. Most women do not think about a man they already feel they fully conquered, but they constantly think about the one who moves like a shadow that never fully touches the ground. The key is this: she must feel like she has you, but never completely, like she can access you, but only to a certain depth, like she knows you, but never well enough to predict your next move. Machiavelli did not believe in emotional balance as a weapon. He believed in control of the terrain. And the terrain here is her mind. Make her feel she moved closer to you. Then step back. Make her believe she caught your interest. Then act like you're in another world. Make her emotions dance to a rhythm only you control. And without noticing, every doubt, every silence, every carefully calculated contradiction becomes an invisible thread tying her to you. She will start talking about you unintentionally, remembering you without trying, thinking about you while getting dressed, while working, while trying to sleep. Not because you are the nicest, not because you are perfect, not because you are always present, but because you are the most intriguing. The dirtiest trick of Machiavelli is turning yourself into an involuntary thought, an unresolved intrigue her mind keeps pulling to the surface because it needs to understand you. And that need is your silent victory. The dirtiest trick of Machiavelli continues when you understand this. A woman does not become attached to what she receives. She becomes attached to what she anticipates receiving and never fully gets. Expectation is more powerful than reality because reality is consumed, but expectation expands. Every move you make, when calculated, becomes a spark that she exaggerates inside her imagination. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to be interesting enough for her to fill the blanks with fantasy. And the moment she starts imagining you as more than you actually are, she becomes trapped inside her own mental creation, a version of you that grows without you having to feed it. The dirty trick is letting her imagination do the work for you. What Machiavelli would have said is this: no power is more effective than power the other person does not recognize as manipulation. If she feels you are trying to impress her, she loses interest because she feels in control. But if she senses that you do not seek her approval, she starts asking herself, why? She is used to men who chase her, who talk too much, who appear anxious, available, desperate for attention. You are not one of them. You are the exception. And exceptions don't just attract, they destabilize. A woman can ignore an ordinary man, but she cannot ignore an emotional anomaly that makes her doubt her own value. And in that space between doubt and curiosity, you become a persistent thought. The dirty trick becomes even more powerful when you introduce small, calculated contradictions. Not contradictions that make you incoherent, but contradictions that make you complex. A simple man is decoded quickly. A complex man forces reflection. One day you're warm, the next day you're distant but respectful. One day you reply with warmth, the next day you seem indifferent. One day you say something that makes her feel special. The next day you act like you have more important things to do, not because you are unstable, because you are strategic. You give her opposing emotional signals that her mind cannot place into a single category. And when a woman cannot categorize a man, she thinks about him longer than she wants to admit. The dirty trick is not making her suffer, it's making her feel. Strong emotions, even uncomfortable ones, are far more memorable than neutrality. A man who provokes nothing is forgotten quickly. A man who provokes something, anything, stays. That's why you must not be flat, not predictable, not obvious. You allow her to feel a small emptiness when you don't reply, a small intrigue when you disappear for a few hours, a small sting of doubt when you don't react like everyone else, because each of those micro-emotions builds an internal map where you become the epicenter. She can ignore a man who treats her the same all the time, but she cannot ignore a man who alters her emotional state without a clear explanation. And the more she tries to understand you, the more she gets involved, the more she attaches, the more she gives herself without realizing it. There is an exact moment where the dirty trick deepens, when she starts justifying your behavior without you saying anything. This is when strategy becomes real power. She begins telling herself, maybe he's busy. Maybe he's naturally reserved. He probably has his own world. Maybe he doesn't want to seem desperate. I like that he's not like the others. Every justification is a defense of your mystery, a shield she builds around your silence, an argument that moves her closer to you even while you remain still. And when a woman defends you inside her own mind, she is already caught, because she is building emotional reasons to stay interested. You are not convincing her, she is convincing herself. And all of this reveals something essential. The dirtiest trick of Machiavelli works because it does not place you as an emotional beggar, but as a figure of psychological power. She begins to feel that she must conquer you, seduce you, impress you. And when a woman feels that she has to prove herself, she starts competing, not with you, with her own insecurity. She starts trying harder, sending the first message, putting more effort into her appearance when she knows she'll see you, thinking about what to say to sound interesting, analyzing how to reply without looking desperate. All of that is energy invested in you, and no one invests energy in something that doesn't matter. Your strategic coldness creates a space where she feels she could lose you, but also feels she could win you if she plays it right. That mixture of hope and uncertainty is pure fuel for obsession. At this stage, the trick becomes even darker, because you introduce emotional unpredictability. You don't speak clearly about your feelings, but you're not completely distant either. You give ambiguous signals that she must interpret. A short message, but meaningful. A look that lasts 1 second longer than normal. A comment that sounds like interest. Then you change the subject. A delayed reply paired with a sentence that throws her off balance. All of this forces her to reevaluate her reading of you every single day. And a woman who reevaluates, analyzes, and reinterprets is thinking about you even when she believes she shouldn't. Another part of the dirty trick is showing value without trying to prove it. When she senses that you have options, that you are a desired man, that you have a life that moves on its own, her instinct activates. Competition, even imaginary competition, is a powerful emotional engine. She doesn't want to lose something other women might want. She won't say it out loud, but she feels it. And that feeling makes her look at you with more interest, more intensity, more desire. At the same time, you never brag, you never announce anything. You simply exist in a way that subtly says, I am chosen. That subtlety is devastating, because it makes her feel you are a prize others are also chasing. And that perception places you on a pedestal she built herself. Up to this point, the manipulation remains silent, elegant, almost invisible. You don't do anything extraordinary, you simply control the rhythm. And without realizing it, she dances to your timing. Every silence of yours weighs more than another man's words. Every small gesture of yours means more than another man's gifts. Because it's not what you do, it's the psychological intensity you awaken. The female mind does not obsess over what is flat, it obsesses over what vibrates beneath the surface. And that is exactly what you become. Tension, a question, a possibility that never closes. At the end of this phase, she starts to feel she could lose you before ever having you. And that is the exact moment a woman thinks about a man the most. When she feels there are no guarantees, when she senses you are not fully available, when she perceives your world does not revolve around her. The dirty trick of Machiavelli lives here, in this emotional border where you are at the same time, close and distant, possible and impossible, clear and ambiguous. That duality is what makes her mind unable to release you. The dirtiest trick of Machiavelli to make a woman think about you goes even deeper when you understand this. Obsession is not born from affection, it is born from unresolved emotional tension. A woman thinks about a man not because he is available, but because he never fully gives himself, because doubt settles in her mind like a flame that never goes out. What does he really want from me? Why does he act like this with me? That emotional confusion turns into a thought that keeps returning no matter how hard she tries to stop it. Every time she tries to forget you, her mind drags her back to the fundamental question: who are you, really? And that question is the root of the darkest trick. to become an emotional puzzle. One of the core elements of this trick is controlling the perception of value. It's not just about looking busy, it's about being a man whose attention must be earned. When she notices you don't rush toward her like other men do, she begins to ask herself, what makes him different? She has spent her life surrounded by men who treat her like an automatic prize, as if her beauty alone is enough to conquer your world. But you don't collapse in her presence. You look at her, but you don't submit. You listen, but you don't lose yourself. You reply, but you don't kneel. And that posture forces her to reevaluate her own power. A woman who feels that her charm does not fully control you starts thinking about you more than she wants to admit, because she doesn't know if she truly has you. And uncertainty is a delicious poison that keeps her awake. The dirty trick demands absolute mastery of emotional language. When you speak, you don't reveal everything. You reveal only what is necessary. When you show interest, you do it with a spark, not a fire. Because fire burns fast, but a spark stays alive for days, weeks, months. You give her ambiguous sentences that can be interpreted in many ways, and she spends hours thinking, what did he mean by that? You give her silences that weigh more than 1,000 explanations, and she wonders if she did something wrong. You give her intimate moments where it feels like you're getting close, and then you return to your center as if nothing happened. That contrast drives her insane, because she doesn't know what ground she's standing on. You are not a normal man, you are a psychological labyrinth. The trick becomes even crueler when you turn yourself into an unattainable ideal, not a perfect ideal, an emotional ideal. A man who doesn't give himself easily is valuable, but a man who seems to have a complex inner world becomes irresistible. She starts imagining your life, your thoughts, your goals, your secrets. She starts building theories about you. She starts creating explanations for why you are the way you are. And that mental construction, born from her own imagination, hooks her more deeply than anything you could ever say. Because now she doesn't desire you for who you are, but for what you represent to her. An emotional challenge, a mystery begging to be discovered, a story she wants to complete. The most Machiavellian part? This process doesn't require lies. It requires omission. You don't tell everything about yourself. You don't reveal your plans. You don't expose your wounds. You don't explain your days. A man who exposes everything inside loses depth, loses mystery, loses magic. But a man who carefully chooses what to reveal and what to keep creates a magnetic aura no woman can ignore. She feels there is more behind your eyes, more behind your silences, more behind your measured replies, and that more is exactly the space where her mind starts working non-stop. The less you say, the more she thinks. The less you reveal, the more she obsesses. The less you give, the more she desires. There is a decisive moment in this trick, when she starts competing with herself, when she analyzes if she was too cold, when she wonders if she should have replied faster, when she asks herself if she ruined something with you. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't react the way she expected. Your silence is not real indifference. It is a strategic weapon. She feels power slipping out of her hands, and that feeling makes her more proactive, more attentive, more emotionally invested. When a woman feels she could lose a man she desires, she begins to act to regain him, and in that action, you become the center of her emotional world. The variable she cannot control, the shadow she chases. The dirty trick also requires that you remain firm. There will be moments when she tries to take control. She will send signals, she will provoke, she will look for reactions. But you do not fall into the game of instant validation. You reply when it is appropriate, not when she demands it. You show up when your strategy decides, not when her ego tries to pull you. She notices. And even if consciously she thinks it annoys her, deep inside, her interest increases. Because you are not reactive, you are selective. And selective men trigger a competitive instinct in women that pushes them beyond logic. She no longer thinks about you purely from desire. She thinks about you from emotional need. When female psychology encounters a man who does not collapse under her charm, it enters a state of hyper-focus. She starts looking for signals you never promised. She starts reading every dot, every comma, every pause. She saves your messages, rereads your words, analyzes patterns, talks about you with her friends, all without you increasing your effort. Because here is the most Machiavellian key. The less you do, the more she does. The less you expose, the more she chases. The less you reveal, the more she invents. And the more she invents, the more she thinks about you. The dirty trick works like a perfectly designed mental trap. She believes she is in control because she is the one who feels, the one who thinks, the one who decides to continue. But every one of her thoughts was triggered by a calculated move from you. A silence, a contradiction, an ambiguous sentence, a strategic withdrawal. You are not reacting to her, she is reacting to you. And that emotional asymmetry is the foundation of all power in the seduction game. This is not about manipulating her to hurt her. It's about understanding how the human mind works to create magnetism she cannot ignore. The dirtiest part is making her imagine herself with you in scenarios you never described. Her mind does the work. She thinks about you when she's alone, when she's getting ready, when she checks her phone, when she hears a song that reminds her of your silences, and the more she tries to resist, the more she thinks. Because psychological resistance creates obsession. And obsession is the final objective of the Machiavellian trick. To make her unable to remove you from her mind, even when she wants to. By the end of this phase, she begins to feel you are not a passing man, but a persistent presence. And that persistence does not come from what you say, but from what you withhold. Not from what you give, but from what you retain. Not from what you do, but from what you imply. You become an emotional shadow. A thought that returns without permission. A question heavier than any answer. And when you reach that point, you know the dirty trick is working. The dirtiest trick of Machiavelli to make a woman think about you reaches an even deeper level when you introduce a dynamic. Very few men have the cold blood to sustain calculated ambivalence. It's not about being cold all the time. It's not about being affectionate all the time. It's about existing in a space where she can never fully predict you. Because a woman only repeatedly thinks about what she cannot decode. And you become that enigma, that emotional code not designed to be easily solved. The trick is to give her moments of closeness that feel sincere, and then withdraw with the same naturalness you appeared, leaving an emotional echo in her memory. She is left with the feeling that she had something, but not enough. And that not enough is the root of her constant thinking. At this point, she is already submerged in an emotional web you designed without rushing. Machiavellian seduction does not happen overnight. It seeps in slowly. It's not an explosion, it's a soft infection, almost invisible. And when she finally notices, it's already taken control. The trick is to show yourself emotionally accessible at certain moments, but never fully available. When she starts feeling comfortable with you, you make a small step back. You don't disappear. You simply change the rhythm. You don't become cold, you become less predictable. You don't reject her. You force her to reevaluate her interpretation of you. And that constant reevaluation feeds her obsession. Machiavelli understood, power does not live in what is shown, but in what is allowed to be interpreted. And that is exactly the game you are playing. When she is about to believe she finally understands how your mind works, you slightly change the dynamic. One day, you reply faster. The next day, you take hours. You say something that sounds intimate. Then later, act like it wasn't that important. You show her a side of you that feels vulnerable, then return to your firm, inaccessible posture. And she no longer knows which version of you is real. That doubt slowly eats at her, because it forces her to observe everything, every detail, every gesture, every word, trying to discover something you will never confirm. The dirty trick becomes even stronger when she starts to feel that she is losing emotional stability with you. Not because you attack her, not because you humiliate her, but because your actions force her to question herself. Why do I care so much? Why do I check if he messaged me? Why do I feel restless when he's not around? She begins to notice that part of her emotional state depends on your movements. And even if she never says it out loud, she feels a growing desire to understand you. She no longer just wants to feel desired. She wants to understand your logic, your mystery, your intention. And the more she tries to understand, the deeper she sinks into the spell. Because every failed attempt to decode you strengthens your presence in her mind. The Machiavellian trick also requires projecting an aura of self-sufficiency. You don't ask for attention, you don't beg, you don't chase affection. She feels you are a man who could live perfectly fine without her, and that feeling activates something deep in female psychology. The desire to be relevant to you. When a woman senses that a man does not need her, but chooses her at certain moments, a powerful emotional collision happens. She wants to understand, why did he choose me? What does he see in me that he doesn't see in others? What kind of man doesn't give his soul easily? And while she tries to answer those questions, you become the center of her reflection. Thinking about you becomes a habit becomes a chain, and an emotional chain is extremely hard to break. But the dirtiest part is not coldness, it's not distance, it's the perfect balance between closeness and mystery. When you share something personal, you do it with surgical precision. You don't reveal everything. You reveal just enough to make her feel closer. But that closeness is an illusion. A man who gives fragments of himself without giving the whole creates a devastating effect. She feels like she's advancing, but at the same time feels she never reaches the core of your soul. And that sensation keeps her active, alert, emotionally invested. You become an emotional challenge, not just another option, a challenge that appears and disappears according to a logic only you understand. And here comes the most Machiavellian part. You make her oscillate between feeling special and feeling insecure. Not aggressively, subtly. You say something that makes her feel unique. Then your behavior neutralizes that intensity. She feels she moved forward with you. The next day you act as if nothing special happened. And that contradiction, instead of pushing her away, hooks her, because her mind needs to resolve the inconsistency. She needs to understand why a man who seems interested does not act desperate. She needs to understand what drives you. And that need to understand is the invisible engine that makes her think about you constantly. The human mind hates empty spaces. When you don't say something, she fills it. When you don't explain your silence, she interprets it. When you don't reveal your intention, she creates theories. And every emotional theory binds her more to you. She starts imagining you even in places where you don't exist. She starts wondering, what are you doing? Who are you with? Why didn't you reply? But that why is not born from what you do. It's born from what you represent. A man she cannot control, and nothing obsesses a woman more than a man who escapes her control. The strategy deepens even further when you allow moments where she feels she could lose you. You don't threaten, you don't exaggerate, you don't create drama. You simply display a rich, independent life. A life full of movement, options, direction. A life where she is not the absolute center, and that hits her deeply. Because she realizes you don't live to conquer her, you don't revolve around her, you don't need her to feel valuable. You are a man who can continue his life without her. And paradoxically, that makes her want to be part of your world. She begins to see your attention as a privilege, not a right. And when a woman feels your attention is a privilege, every small gesture of yours gains enormous symbolic value. Another part of the dirty trick is mastering the emotion of almost. You almost said something important. You almost created an intimate moment. You almost revealed something deep, but you didn't. Almost is a devastating psychological weapon, because it leaves an open space, and that open space becomes a mental hole her mind desperately wants to fill. She thinks about what could have been, not what actually happened, and what could have been is far more powerful than any completed reality. You keep her in a state where she feels, if I try a little more, if I understand a little more, if I invest a little more, maybe I'll reach him. That constant effort drains her emotionally, but at the same time binds her to you in a way she doesn't consciously recognize. When the trick reaches this stage, you are no longer just a man in her life. You become an emotional pattern. She compares other men to you. She thinks about you even while talking to someone else. She feels no one else has the same depth, the same calm, the same controlled unpredictability, the same measured intensity. You become a standard, a contrast, a shadow that follows her thoughts, and that shadow is the silent proof of the power you've built. The dirtiest trick of Machiavelli reaches its most delicate point when you introduce this idea. You are a possibility, not a guarantee. A woman does not obsess over what she already has. She obsesses over what she fears losing before obtaining. The mind fixates on the uncertain, the unfinished, the unresolved. On what could be, but isn't yet. That's why the trick is not to present yourself as unreachable. It's to appear reachable sometimes and distant at other times. That emotional oscillation creates a void. And she tries to fill that void with thoughts, fantasies, interpretations, and theories about you. And every theory makes you more present in her mind, more real than even the men who openly chase her. This is where subtle obsession begins. The idea that you move on an emotional rhythm that does not depend on her. You are not an open book, but you are not a wall. You are an incomplete message, a half-finished sentence, a look that feels like it says something, but never confirms it. You are a promise broken before being spoken. And this ambiguity forces her to remember you. In every silence you leave. In every space you don't fill. In every minute of absence, she feels more than she admits. The Machiavellian truth is simple. People don't think about what is resolved. They think about what has no answer. And you become exactly that, an open question. She begins to sense that you have an inner world she doesn't get access to easily. And that intrigues her. Women don't just desire a man, they desire access to a man's emotional universe. But you never give full access. You don't state where you stand emotionally, you don't explain your intentions, you don't confirm her suspicions, you don't deny her doubts. And that lack of clarity pulls her inward, forcing her to analyze you like an impossible equation. Every time she thinks she's moving closer, she feels like she steps back. Every time she thinks you desire her, you act like you don't care. Every time she thinks you're leaving, you reappear naturally, shattering all logic. And she no longer knows if you are an opportunity or a mirage. That is the dirtiest trick. To become an emotional presence that never fully defines itself. At this stage, your behavior begins to reshape her perception of time. When you're present, time speeds up. When you're gone, time becomes heavy. Without saying a word, you begin controlling the emotional rhythm of her day. She asks herself, why didn't he text? Why didn't he reply? Why was he different today? Why was he more affectionate before? And even when she tries to ignore it, each question becomes a seed planted in her mind, and the seed grows because you never water it. She waters it herself. The Machiavellian trick also involves showing her you have priorities bigger than her. You don't say it, you demonstrate it. You are a man who is busy, focused, driven, with goals, with desires that don't orbit around a woman. She feels you are someone who could continue living without needing her approval. And that perception hits deep inside female ego. Because a woman does not obsess over a man who needs her. She obsesses over a man who can live without her, but chooses her from time to time. That, from time to time, is one of the most powerful weapons of the dirty trick. You don't choose her always. You don't choose her never. You choose her sometimes, and sometimes creates a question that becomes a thorn in her mind. The darkest part of the trick is this. You don't need to be cruel to be devastating. You only need to be precisely unpredictable. Unpredictability is not chaos. It is strategy. You don't disappear for weeks. You disappear for hours. You don't ignore everything. You ignore one detail. You're not always cold. You're warm at unexpected moments. And she begins to feel there is a hidden pattern inside your actions, even if none truly exists. She tries to decode you like an emotional cipher. She rereads your messages looking for clues. She compares you to other men and finds no similarities. Every man feels like an open book. You feel like scattered pages, fragments. She senses she will only understand you if she goes deeper, and the deeper she goes, the deeper she sinks into the labyrinth you slowly built. Another layer of the dirtiest trick is selective presence. You are not always there, but when you are memorable. You don't talk much, but when you speak, you say something that marks her. You don't look desperate, but when you show interest, you do it with an intensity she feels in her skin. Then you pull back, leaving behind an emotional echo that vibrates in her memory. She keeps thinking, "Why did you say that? Why did you look at me like that? Why did you appear at that exact moment?" She keeps thinking about the version of you that appeared, not the one that disappeared. Because you don't disappear coldly, you disappear elegantly. Your absence is never abandonment, it is strategic silence, and strategic silence is more powerful than any speech. Here another Machiavellian element appears: invisible comparison. She begins comparing you to other men without you doing anything. She starts noticing they are too obvious, too available, too needy, and she begins to realize you are the only one who does not orbit around her. And although logically that should push her away, in reality it pulls her closer, because she senses you are an emotional challenge, not an easy prize, and the human brain is wired to fight for what it feels it could lose. Ease does not create desire. Calculated difficulty does, but the most destructive and most effective part of the trick is making her invest emotional energy without realizing it. You don't tell her to try, you make her try. You don't tell her to think about you, you make her think. You don't ask for attention, you make her seek it. And every action she takes to obtain your validation creates another emotional link, because the human brain attaches to what it invests effort into. If she texts first, she attaches. If she thinks, "Why isn't he replying?" she attaches. If she analyzes your words, she attaches. If she talks about you with her friends, she attaches. You do nothing, she does everything. And that is the dirtiest part of the trick. Your power does not come from your actions. It comes from the emotions she generates by herself. As this progresses, she begins to feel something dangerous: vulnerability. Not vulnerability toward you, but vulnerability toward the idea of losing you. And that vulnerability makes her more intense, more affectionate, more emotionally active. She begins to see you as someone who does not fit into her normal world. She starts remembering details about you that other men don't have. She starts feeling there is something special about you that she cannot let go of, and you do nothing to confirm it. You let her build it inside herself, because illusion is more powerful than reality, and you allow her to create the exact illusion that binds her the most. When the trick reaches this stage, you are no longer just a man, you are a symbol. You represent mystery, desire, incompleteness, possibility. You represent exactly what her mind cannot abandon. She thinks about you when she's distracted, when she tries to work, when she lies down, when she wakes up. Not because you asked her to, but because your strategy left empty spaces inside her. And those spaces are filled with your shadow. The dirtiest trick of Machiavelli to make a woman think about you becomes truly powerful when you introduce the feeling of emotional exclusivity, without giving it completely. You don't tell her she's special, but in unexpected moments, you act like she is. You don't shower her with compliments, but at one precise moment, you look at her like you see something no one else has noticed. You don't chase her, but when you move toward her, you do it with a silent intensity that burns into her emotional memory. And just when she feels she finally won you, that she entered your world, you return to your natural calm, leaving her wondering, was that real, or did I imagine it? That collision between certainty and uncertainty is one of the sharpest weapons of the Machiavellian trick. She begins to notice you are not like the others. Other men pursue her with obvious enthusiasm. You choose your moments, other men give her words. You give her silence, other men insist. You observe, other men show need. You show calm, and that calm disorients her, because it makes her feel that you already have an emotional world built, a world not everyone can access. You are not desperate for affection. You are not chasing validation. And this idea shakes her deeply, because most men collapse under her charm. You don't. And that silent no hits the ego like a bullet. It opens a crack inside her, a crack she tries to close by thinking about you. At this point, the trick demands precision. You become a presence that appears right when she starts letting go. Not before, not when she asks, when she least expects it. She begins to learn that she cannot anticipate you. She cannot predict when you will text, when you will approach, when you will show interest. And that unpredictability awakens an emotional intensity she never feels with predictable men. A predictable man offers safety. An unpredictable man offers emotion. And emotion, even when it hurts, is more addictive than safety. The human mind is wired to chase intermittent dopamine, not constant availability. And you become exactly that: intermittent dopamine, intermittent mystery, intermittent desire. The Machiavellian trick amplifies when she starts noticing tiny changes in you: a slightly shorter message, a glance that looks away, a delayed reply, and she feels something shifted inside your inner world. Then the spiral begins. Did I do something wrong? Did he lose interest? Why is he different? Who is he with? These questions are not born from what you say, but from what you don't say. The absence of confirmation forces her to build scenarios in her mind, and every scenario revolves around you. And here is the most Machiavellian part: you don't even need to be present to generate impact. She manipulates herself with her own imagination. The dirtiest trick is not giving affection or withdrawing it. It's creating constant emotional tension. Not dramatic tension, subtle tension. She feels you're there, but she can't have you. She feels she has you, but not completely. She feels she could conquer you, but doesn't know how. She feels she could lose you and doesn't want to risk it. That mixture of desire and fear is one of the most powerful forces that exists. A man who only creates desire is interesting. A man who creates desire and fear of losing him is unforgettable. And your strategy is designed to turn you into the kind of presence that weighs more when absent than when present. There is a key part of this trick. Your silence is not emptiness. It is a message. Your lack of explanation is not lack of interest. It is an invitation for her to fill the gaps with emotion. Your distance is not coldness. It is a mirror showing her her own insecurities. She starts wondering why she cares so much about a man who never gives everything. And the answer is simple: because you didn't give yourself like the others. Men who give everything immediately create gratitude. Men who give fragments create desire. Desire is born from scarcity, and you are scarce, measured, calculated, selective. She feels that earning your affection would be a victory, not a gift. And nothing marks the mind like a personal victory. Now the Machiavellian trick goes even deeper. When you project an aura of purpose, she senses that you have a life that does not depend on her. A path you would follow even if she disappeared completely. And that perception places her in a vulnerable emotional position. She wants to be part of your world, but you give her no guarantees. You never say, "I need you. You are my priority." Instead, you show that you have goals, boundaries, ambitions, a direction that existed before she entered your life. And nothing obsesses a woman more than a man who does not make her the center, but occasionally includes her as if she were a sacred exception. Here appears the most Machiavellian element of all: incremental emotional investment. She invests a little today, a little tomorrow, a little more the next day. She doesn't realize that every micro-investment deepens her attachment. When she texts first, she invests. When she thinks about you before sleeping, she invests. When she worries about your silence, she invests. When she analyzes your words, she invests. When she imagines you with another woman, she invests. And each emotional investment pulls her deeper into the bond you built slowly. Not because you openly manipulate her, but because your strategy allows her to build her own emotional labyrinth. The dirty trick also relies on contrast. You are not always distant. Sometimes you are unexpectedly warm. Sometimes you say something that touches her deeply. Sometimes you show vulnerability. Sometimes you seem to open up, and then you return to your center. This technique works like a heartbeat: expansion and contraction, warmth and cold, closeness and distance. She begins to live to the rhythm of your fluctuations, and even if she tries to ignore it, her body reacts without permission. Butterflies, mild anxiety, anticipation, nostalgia, sudden urges to text you. You don't create neutral emotions, you create intense emotions. And what is intense is remembered. What is intense is thought about. What is intense becomes habit. The Machiavellian part is this: you never fully give yourself. You always remain slightly incomplete. There is always a part of you that stays unreachable. There is always something you didn't say, and that incompleteness is the engine of her desire. She feels that if she tries a little more, if she understands you a little more, If she moves one step closer, she will reach you, and that is exactly what you want. For her to believe she is close, but never close enough. Because a woman who believes she is close never gives up. She always thinks one last step remains, one last gesture, one last conversation. And while she waits for that moment, she thinks about you endlessly. When the trick reaches this stage, she cannot remove you from her mind, not because you demand it, but because you moved in a way her mind cannot close the cycle with you. You are an open chapter, and open chapters haunt. Open chapters hurt, open chapters obsess. She tries to move forward, but something pulls her back. That something is you, and you did nothing except understand human psychology better than most men. The dirtiest trick of Machiavelli to make a woman think about you reaches its culmination when you understand this. Obsession is not created in the present, it is created in the imagined future. What she feels today is not enough. You must build inside her mind a story that never completes, an emotional narrative that only advances if you allow it. Obsession is not born from what you give, but from what you imply you might give someday. And inside that invisible promise, inside that intangible expectation, lives the most sophisticated form of psychological domination. You don't control her directly, you control what she believes could happen between you, and that belief is far more powerful than any concrete reality. Here, the trick requires absolute coldness. You become the man she feels she could lose at the exact moment she most wants to have you. You don't disappear completely, but you pull back just enough for her heart to feel an unexpected void. You don't cut contact, but you reduce it enough for her to notice the difference. You don't stop being there, but you're no longer there in the way she got used to. And that small shift cracks the emotional stability she thought she had built with you. She starts asking herself, what changed? Why did it change? Did I do something wrong? But the Machiavellian part is this. You didn't do anything obvious. You simply broke the pattern she had grown comfortable with. She starts trying harder, texting more, thinking more, because the mind chases what escapes, not what is handed over. The dirty trick becomes almost diabolical when you relate to her without expressing everything. Every gesture you make becomes an emotional riddle. She feels you're there, but doesn't know if you're fully there. She feels you choose her, but doesn't know if you prefer her. She feels you like her, but doesn't know how much. And this gray zone condemns her to constant thinking. A woman can only relax emotionally when she feels certainty. You give her the opposite, pleasurable doubt. Because even though doubt hurts, doubt also seduces. Doubt keeps hope alive. Doubt makes her imagine endings you never promised. And in every imagined future, you are at the center. At this point, her mind belongs to you in silence. Not because you demanded it, but because she gave you territory without realizing it. She thinks about you in the morning when she checks her phone to see if you wrote. She thinks about you in the afternoon when she interprets your short, cold reply. She thinks about you at night when her mind replays every detail searching for signs of your interest. And you do nothing to stop that cycle, because that cycle is your victory. Obsession is not forced, it is allowed. She became trapped inside the narrative you built. A narrative where you are the silent protagonist, and she is the desperate seeker of meaning. The dirtiest trick also involves using the oldest weapon of seduction: rarity. The rarer you are, the more valuable you become. Not strange in the sense of weird, rare in the sense of hard to obtain. A woman does not obsess over what is available all the time. She obsesses over what appears selectively. You are not the man who texts every day, but when you text, you strike the heart. You are not the man who looks needy, but when you show a minimum of vulnerability, she feels she pierced your armor. And that small access, that tiny drop of intimacy, makes her believe there is much more beneath the surface. You let her see a fragment of your soul, and then you close the door. And that closure forces her to think about what she saw, about what she didn't see, about what she could see if you allowed it. Here is where the trick reaches its most Machiavellian level. You are not trying to control what she feels right now, you are trying to control what she remembers when you're not there. Intelligently managed absence is more powerful than presence. When you're gone, she relives your moments, repeats your words, returns to your silences, starts listening to songs that remind her of you, even though you never mentioned any. She looks at places where she thinks you might be. She imagines conversations that never happened. The human mind, when emotionally dysregulated, creates realities, and fabricated realities are stronger than real ones. The dirty trick also exploits the human need for closure. She feels nothing ended with you. She feels something is unfinished. She feels she owes you a conversation, an explanation, an opportunity. And unfinished stories do not fade. They haunt, they pull, they obsess. But that unfinished feeling exists because you designed it that way. You never confirmed anything. You never cancelled anything. You never clarified your position. You leave open spaces, loose ends, half-open doors. And every one of those doors becomes a passage through which her mind returns to you. She wants to close the chapter, but she can't, because you never fully wrote it. And an incomplete chapter becomes an emotional wound that never heals. Here appears the final element of the Machiavellian trick, the illusion of destiny. She starts feeling that you are not just another man, but a man with whom something could happen. Not because you said it, but because you suggested it through small moments of emotional connection that she magnifies. You create micro-moments, a held gaze, a reply loaded with intention, a sentence that sounds deeper than it actually is, and those micro-moments become enormous in her mind. The mind exaggerates what it desires, amplifies what it fears, repeats what it does not understand. You gave her emotional material to construct a fictional destiny, and she feeds it every day. Nothing is dirtier and more effective than allowing a woman to fall in love with a version of you that she created herself. You are not that perfect, mysterious, deep man. You simply provided the necessary stimuli for her to complete the rest. And the version she built is infinitely more powerful than any version you could ever perform. She falls in love with her own mental design, and as long as that design exists, you exist inside her. The Machiavellian trick ends when you understand this. It's not about being present, it's about remaining. Most men try to conquer through presence. Strategists conquer through absence. The man who is present can be forgotten. The man who leaves an emotional void never is. She may walk away physically, she may try to distract herself, she may try to replace you, but every time her mind goes quiet, something will pull her back to you, because that is what you are now, an emotional echo, an open question, a sweet thorn, an involuntary thought, a shadow that appears when the lights go out, a man who never gives himself completely, but never fully disappears. And there is no greater Machiavellian victory than becoming the thought she never asked for, but cannot remove from her mind.